And my purpose today is to share with you the way that we approach culture. And I hope to inspire you that this is a business issue and an issue that has a lot of upside for your performance. If you feel that this would be a moment for you to dedicate yourselves more in a more precise way to culture. I've worked with so many different organizations in many, many years now, and I've seen some senior teams be successful at actually introducing some new characteristics in their culture, and I've seen others who have not been successful. I've seen many organizations define a set of values and then communicate those values and then wonder why nothing changed. And so the first little clue for you is the words walking the talk. That, of course, it's not what you say, it's not the talk, it's the walk that communicates the culture. And so it's not easy work, but what I've tried to do, what I see as my role really, is to make it straightforward and simple and clear. That in fact it's not just vague, there is actually some science to it, and I want to share a little bit of that with you today. We're going to spend maybe 45 minutes that I will talk, and then we'll go into questions. Maybe when we go into questions, I might try changing into Spanish. We'll see how we go. So we can have a conversation at that point. But first of all, I just wanted to introduce some of the insights that I've had, and then hear some more from you about whether you're already doing culture, why that might be. Do you have different business imperatives? Has your strategy changed? Are you doing a merger? Are you growing very fast and you're worried that you're going to lose the culture that you have? So there's many different reasons that people go into it. But one that I want to start with is to tell you that culture is not about making people happy. It's not the same as engagement. It's not the same as being a great place to work. Although one of the outcomes is that you can become a great place to work. But that's actually not, that's like a benefit, it's not actually the purpose. And I say that for a reason. I want to start by just giving you a definition of what culture is, which I think might help explain that. And this definition actually comes from another consultant, a guy called Ned Morse, who wrote a great book called Switch Points on how they changed the culture of the Canadian National Railway. And he describes the culture as being the pattern of behavior that people and processes encourage and discourage over a period of time. So culture is about behavior. It's not about feelings. So for example, culture is about how your people deal with failure, how they deal with mistakes, how you treat customers, how you encourage or discourage your people, how you run meetings, whether you are on time. Oh, this is Spain. Maybe that would be a real exception. But for example, there are some companies, maybe even one in this room, who have patterns of behavior, which is that things start and finish on time, and that everybody, when they say they will deliver something by the end of July, they deliver it by the end of July. There are some companies where your word is your bond, where commitments and promises are considered to be absolutely sacrosanct. And there are other companies where it's more maybe not. There are some companies who have patterns of behavior of really listening to their customers. And there are other companies who have a pattern of behavior which says, we really know what is right, and we will tell our customers what is right. There are some companies who work very collaboratively across the business. There are others who work very strongly in silos. So those patterns of behavior, as I'll show you in a minute, will impact your business. And those patterns of behavior are encouraged or discouraged by your leaders all the time, without them even maybe knowing. And that's why, you can take a set of values, you can communicate those values. I've seen people do that. I've seen people stand up and say, oh, you know, we're a real team and we value teamwork. And then in one sentence, they say something about one of their team colleagues on stage while they're in front of 1,000 people. And I go, well, that was a waste of money. You know, they've done this whole presentation about teamwork, but what people will remember was the one comment where it was clear that the two groups were not one team. You understand? So it's that is the way that you encourage or discourage. If somebody raises, if somebody admits that there is a mistake, if someone in your organization acknowledges that they have a project in trouble, how that person is treated is all to do with whether they're being encouraged or discouraged to be honest and to come forward with the truth, you know. So that's what culture is about. And one of the mistakes that I found that many organizations make is actually to believe that they can change their whole culture. Okay, you will never change your whole culture. What you can do, and what I have seen very successfully implemented, is to pick one or two behaviors, one or two elements of your culture, and say these ones really, really matter. We are going to create these across the whole company as the new norm, as the way we want to operate. And that is achievable. So I think one reason where culture sometimes has developed a poor reputation is that sometimes I will put this responsibility to HR, but it's more than that. Often it's the line managers as well. They take on too much. They make big statements about we're going to become the organization that is accountable and collaborative and customer focused and innovative and best place to work and this and that and the other. And then, of course, there's no really clear measures, and then there's a lot of investment made, and then you can't see any change, and then people go, well, what is all this about? So one of my pieces of advice is to keep this simple and to take steps along the way that are not so big. And I want to show you now a little video that just illustrates what I see is the essence of what you're trying to do when you say you want to change your culture. So this video is just 3 minutes long, and it comes off YouTube, so the quality is not great, but you'll get the essence of what it's about. And what you see in this 3 minutes is, well, we'll discuss afterwards what it is. But okay, I just click once, right.
unstoppable. Unstoppable. That's right. I got to be unstoppable. That's right. I believe you guys.
Okay, so what happened there? Let's look at that in a few different pieces. First of all, what was the role of that first guy? What were the characteristics of that first man who stood up and danced? What did you notice about him? He was crazy, huh? He was a loner. He would have been dancing all day, whether anyone else danced or not. He didn't really care. And in your organization, let's imagine that you and your organization have one particular behavior that you are looking to get everybody to adopt. So in their case, let's imagine that this was the dance party organization, right? And they were looking to have everybody stand up and dance. And in 3 minutes, they achieved that. And did you notice at the end how people were running down the hill to join in? So that's a very, very important moment that happened there, which we call the tipping point, la punta de inflexión. So what happened in that video was that it took a long time for anybody to stand up and dance, right? You would have been sitting there going, why is she showing this video? What's this guy doing dancing here? You know, and it takes 8, and this man is dancing alone, and then there were 1 or 2 people who came with him, and then there were a few more, and then there is a moment where everybody comes with you. And that is the moment that you have to work to when you are working on culture change. You don't need everybody to be great dancers. You don't need everybody to be like that first guy, or even like the second guy, or the third guy. Did you notice the third guy? He was very important. Because what he did, remember he was a bit bigger and not a very good dancer, the guy in black, right? Okay, so what that guy does is he normalizes the process. Because people go, oh, if he can dance, oh, maybe I can dance too, right? Because he looks like me. He's normal. So when you're thinking about what it is you're trying to do on culture, in my view, you are not trying to change the whole culture. What you are trying to do is to take 1 or 2 key behaviors or key ways of thinking and say, these are the standards that we will have across our whole organization. If you belong to this organization, we expect you to be a dancer. We expect you to wave your hands in the air or whatever it is, okay? And that becomes the norm. And even if you don't like that, and you saw many of those people, they weren't comfortable about dancing, right? But they joined in because it became the norm. And then there were a few people sitting on the ground who were never going to join in, right? Now, if that was your organization over a period of time, those people will probably leave. It's very uncomfortable to sit on the ground when everyone else is dancing, right? You will tend to go somewhere else. So what's interesting about managing and planning for your culture is that if you focus on the people, if you imagine that there are 4 different types of people in any organization, right? There are the ones who are already adopting the behavior you want. There are the ones who are the early adopters, the ones who will be open to change, the ones who follow, and the ones who never want to come. And the group you need to focus on are the group who are open to change. Because if you get, and that figure I had up before of 35%, there's been research done by McKinsey and others to say, what is the moment? How many people do you need to come with you before the norm or the culture changes? And it's something between 20, 25, 35%. It's not everyone. But what was powerful about that little video for me was that if I want to join in, if I want to be committed, if I want to join this culture, it's very clear to me what I have to do. I have to stand up, I have to put my hands in the air, I have to move my legs a little bit, and I'm in, right? Now, in your organization, it's probably not so clear. So one of the key pieces of work is to, and this, I'll show you now a little bit the process for changing a culture, but one of the key pieces is actually to make the link very clearly between the business imperative that you have for your business. What is it you're trying to achieve? And what is the target culture that you need? Specifically, what are the behaviors that you're looking for? Okay. Then, of course, you can look at what is the culture that you have now, and then start to look at what might be the gap between those two. And this is the process that Sarah and I, we spend time on when we're thinking about how we can actually help an organization, is how you go systematically through this process and how you work then with the executive team to help them to understand the extent to which they walk their talk. What do they have to do to demonstrate that they're serious about that? And how can you then build a plan which will include all those elements and help them to produce that, and then how do you execute it? So that's the process that we follow. But what I want to do for a few minutes now is actually have you think in terms of your organization and answer a couple of questions in terms of what would be the benefits for you, for your business, if you adopt certain new characteristics in your culture. And Sarah called this morning together culture and strategy and results. And so I want you to think about this as it relates to you. Now, unfortunately, you can't quite see these colors, but all of you will have some form of strategy, a strategy for growth, a strategy for improving your profit, your performance next year, and that will have certain figures. This is written here, 500 million, this is 600 million, so whether that's revenue, whether that's profit, whether that's euros, whether that's whatever, imagine whatever your number is, but there will be some delta, there will be some figure here, which is where you are trying to go in your 3 or 5 year out scenario. And then I want you to think about the question is, how do you need people to behave in order to achieve that? So what in fact does that growth require of your people? And specifically, how do you need people to behave that is different from how they're behaving now? And then the next question is, how much risk is there in those numbers if those behaviors don't occur? So that really is the work that needs to be done, in my view, in any organization with any group of executives before they are willing to invest seriously in building culture. Because remember I said that culture is the patterns of behavior. So for example, I have worked in the past, I think there's a couple of pharmaceutical groups here today, and I was working with one pharmaceutical group a while ago where the key factor for their growth was actually to get government approval on some new drugs that they were building. Now, that factor did not actually require people to change their behavior. It was really about a small group of people who had to work very, very hard with the government in order to get what they wanted. So in that instance, culture or the patterns of behavior were not the critical factor to whether or not they were going to achieve growth. But then I'll do this exercise with other groups where, for example, the critical factor for growth is globalization, and therefore we need to take certain products and work collaboratively with different regions, et cetera, or they may be looking to cross-sell products from one customer set into another customer set. And they will say, we will not achieve that unless our people start working collaboratively and not working in silos. So they will say, in fact, that they see a very high percentage of their performance growth tied up with behavior. So I find that this is a useful exercise to consider, to say that if you're going to do something meaningful in culture, you do need to see it as a business imperative, as a real business driver. And it needs to be managed with the same level of rigor that you would manage your technology or your brand or any other component of your business that has such a critical impact on your performance growth. But it's not just because we want people to feel good, as I said before. And so there are certain moments in any organization's life when you say, actually, the risk here, in this instance, these guys are saying, well, we think we are risking that we will lose 30 million of this unless we can get certain key behaviors from our people. So then they say, okay, so potentially the benefit of being able to do something where we can increase the likelihood that our people will change behavior, where we can systematically cause one or two behaviors to become standard in the organization, as we saw there with those people dancing. Then they say, okay, now we can do that. That's doable. We can really put some effort in and make that happen. So as you're thinking that through, I've found that it's useful to think in 6 different, we call them archetypes. And I'm going to go through each of these and then ask you just to think about it yourself. And then when we come to questions, we could focus on 1 or 2 of these a little bit more. So in the work that I've done over the years, I've found that when people say, what is the behavior that we need, their answers will tend to fit into one of these categories. So I'm interested in terms of where your answer would sit. The first one is achievement. So achievement is associated with organizations who need more responsibility, more discipline, more rigor, where you are managing very tight costs and there is a need to be really confident that people will stay within the boundaries of what they have committed to. So the achievement culture is focused all the time on we did what we said we were going to do, we deliver our numbers, so it's very numbers orientated. And for some organizations, that's an important distinction. I was talking to 1 or 2 people before, in recent years, doing some work with GE in the US. And some of you may remember way back in the days of Jack Welch, when he started, he did a lot of work in culture. He was one of the pioneers in this. And his focus in those early years was very much on achievement and also on his people. Now he's come through, and his successor, Emmelt, has come through with a much stronger focus on innovation and growth and customers and so on. But the first focus was on achievement. Second one is customer centricity. So some organizations are saying we absolutely have to become better listeners. We have to become closer. We have to become more engaged with our clients. We have to care more about them and put them at the center of everything we do. So there's a set of behaviors on that. Others are focused very much on we need to become one team. We need to learn to work collaboratively across the business and put the good of the whole more strongly than the good of the individual or even the individual business unit. That's a very different set of behaviors. Others will focus on innovation. We have to become more creative. We have to do things differently. We have to pursue an excellence of quality that we haven't done before. For some, it is about we want to be the best employer. We want to attract and keep people. We're concerned about losing our talent, and so therefore we did a lot of work in Brazil with an organization just at the time where all the international, the global firms, there was a bank, all the global firms were coming into the Brazilian market, and their focus was very much on wanting to be what we call people first, because they wanted to actually become the best place to work. So this is the instance where it is about best place to work. And then the last one is about greater good, or the social responsibility, organizations who want to build a culture where their people think beyond the boundaries of just our profit. So if you think about those 6 together, and then imagine for a moment, I don't know if you remember, or maybe even in Spain you still can, you can buy lamps, and they call them lava lamps, and there's colored water inside and the water moves. Do you have that image? Okay, so if you imagine that image, what happens is that if you think about those archetypes, over a period of time, your organization will have become stronger at some than at others. So every organization has a bias. It's either very, very numbers driven and it's all about achievement, and now you're trying to become more customer centric. Or perhaps you've been very innovative and expansive and now you're trying to become more disciplined. So what we find is that in the process of defining the culture that you need and understanding the culture that you want, you have to consider that your organization is perhaps moving from a very achievement-focused organization, and now you want to balance it more so that you also are very customer-centric or whatever. So what I've found is that there's like a hierarchy of values, and that as one gets greater, the other one will tend to get a little bit less. Because basically culture is about the decisions that you're making every day. So what do you prioritize? Which kind of people do you choose to hire? All of those things will be determined by which values are the ones that you're really focusing on at the moment. So this exercise of what is the most important, we've just done an interesting piece of work because we have a tool by which you can measure against these 6. And we did a very interesting exercise with an organization who said that what they needed to be was much more customer-centric. That was what they brought us in to do. And when we did the research, what we found was they were actually over-customer-centric. They were so customer-centric that they were just running around all the time. Everything the customer wanted, they were going, yes, 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 yes. And what they actually lacked was achievement. What they lacked was planning and discipline and rigor and prioritization and resource allocation and all sorts of boring management skills. So, while they wanted to be customer-centric, the research actually showed that the core element that would make them more customer-centric was for them to become a more achievement-orientated organization. Does that make sense? So it's not always what you think that is causing you to hold back on some of your performance issues that you're looking to achieve. And this tool that we have, it looks at how much of these 6 you have. These are achievement customer-centric. And it also looks, we have another little feature here, which is what we call overused. So we look not only about whether that archetype is present, but whether it's overused. And their results, I haven't talked to you about this, it's really, we'll talk about it after. Really interesting, they came up with this huge achievement, customer-centric overused result, where you just went, oh, okay, so this isn't, they were thinking they had to go around communicating to everybody, oh, you need to be more customer-centric, because their customers were very unhappy. But what they discovered was their customers were unhappy because they didn't follow through and because they didn't fix the root causes, because their frontline people were always just responding to everything that the customers were asking for. So there's a couple of nodding heads happening in the room here on that story. Okay, so that's that. Just a couple of things I want to do. Okay, so a couple more things I want to do, and then we'll open it up for questions. 2 other pieces I want to. Remember I said before that culture is about what is encouraged and discouraged over a long period of time. So another way to look at that is that culture is the result of the messages that people receive about how to behave. And those messages are not what is spoken, but what is unspoken. So when you're thinking about how you can manage your culture, remember I said before that culture can be managed, you need to understand where the sources of those messages come from. And the sources come from three places: from behaviors, from symbols, and from systems. So behaviors are what I see around me, all the other people, how everybody else behaves. And you saw in that video how people were watching everybody else, and how by getting just that critical mass of people, it suddenly became more uncomfortable to stay seated than it was to stand up. Okay? And so people will look at what everybody else is doing, and if you're new in an organization, you will adapt. Any of you come to your own organizations less than 2 years ago? Some of you new in your roles? Okay, so when you see the new organization, you adapt. You look, how do I need to behave? And then you adapt. We all adapt. Okay, we are adaptive creatures. We are trained to fit in to the world of which we are a member, the community of which we are a member. And so that's what people will do. And so people adapt. They look at how other people are behaving, and they also look at symbols. And symbols are the way time is spent, the way money is spent, who gets promoted, who has the best office. So many things that are done that tell people what is really valued in this organization. So you can always tell what an organization values or what an individual leader values if you look at the way they spend their time, so their calendar, and how they assign or allocate money. So their checkbook on a personal level, or the budget on a group level, because that says what we really value, right? And then the last thing are the systems. So how we reward people, how we plan, how we do goals, the structure, the processes that we have. Those are also important in terms of how we, where the messages are coming from. So very simple in terms of how you change culture. You get very clear on what you want, what dancing looks like, which archetype are we trying to do, what behaviors do we want, and then you seek to align as many of the behaviors and the symbols and the systems as you possibly can, so that people get new messages, and then most people will change their behavior. So there are 9 levers that you can put into a culture plan. The behavior of the top team is critical, of course. How you develop people, who you promote, how you place people in different roles, who you hire, who you fire. We call that people placement. The design of the building itself, the quick wins that you have, lots of little things that you can do, the process of performance management, the business processes, your communication systems, your communication with the external world, the relationship between you and the external world. And it's actually possible to put together a plan where you address each one of those in terms of what are the messages these are sending about how we want to behave. But in the end, the piece it's about more than anything else is leadership. And that's why I'll end as I started by saying it's not about the words, it's about the actions. And to change your culture, what you're looking at more than anything is leaders who are prepared to walk that talk, to take those steps. And that's the engagement process that you mean. Not that all leaders will behave that way, but you need the majority of leaders to start to really focus on that on a regular basis. The two link very closely together, the leadership and the culture.